And I'm Keon.
And this is Inevitable, that podcast where we get bushwhacked, because this week we watched Bushwhacked.
Written by Tim Minear.
Directed by Tim Minear.
And aired on September 27th, 2002.
Yeah, as you can see, Keon, I didn't just trick you. I didn't just bushwhack you in the opening there. So, I guess context for those, for the unaware.
For everyone.
For everyone. We were deciding on intros before we started, as we do, every week. It's like the last thing we do right before we start recording. And we had some suggestions, and I was like, I'm fine with this one, the one that we used. And Keon was like, all right, yeah, might as well do that one, because then we can get right into something that I want to talk about. And I said, all right, yeah, all right. Pretty much exactly like that. And Keon was like, yeah, it kind of sounds like you're just tricking me and that you're not actually going to use it. And but I did use it.
Yeah, maybe this episode and Jane's behavior has just traumatized me and destroyed what little trust I had left in human beings.
We've been doing this podcast for how many years, and how many times have I tricked you on the podcast? In fact, you've probably tricked me more often. All those fake facts that you just say on the podcast and then just go, that's not actually true. I just made that up, which you've done 4 or 5 times now.
Yeah, I did it. I've done it on Firefly episodes, of which there are only 2 so far, and I guess 3 minutes of a third one so far. Anyway, regardless, the thing I kind of wanted to talk about here is, so I didn't know really what bushwhacked meant, or I guess to bushwhack, what that verb was. So I just looked it up. I looked it up 20 minutes ago, actually. And every site seems to be giving a different definition. So, which is just strange, So Lexico.com, which is the Oxford English Dictionary's free site, they have their paid service, I guess, but Lexico.com is their free site. Says that bushwhacked means exhausted or worn out, North American. Merriam-Webster says it's a transitive verb to attack someone by surprise from a hidden place, or to travel by foot through uncleared terrain. And then Urban Dictionary, maybe the most correct and boots on the ground dictionary of all, says to start something and then leave it for someone else to clear up. Any act where responsibility can be transferred or ignored.
A lot of those, surprisingly, or perhaps not surprisingly, could apply to this episode.
Yeah, I think, in fact, all of them can, except maybe travel by foot through uncleared terrain. Although, you can say that loosely applies, as they're traveling through the ship, which has been, littered with debris, the remnants of the people who used to live there.
Remnants and debris is a curious way to describe human bodies, but yeah, I mean, it's also not wrong. It's just a curious phrase to use.
Yeah, true enough.
Yeah, so Bushwhacked, episode 3 of Firefly. I almost said episode 3 of Trust Your Doctor, which guess Trust Your Doctor. I've made a couple not Freudian slips, but slips into saying Trust Your Doctor this morning already. It just shows how much we're missing Doctor Who and that it should come back, or how much I'm missing Doctor Who. But anyway, episode 3 of Firefly, really, really ballsy, doing the enemy captures the hero ship, but hey, it worked. Yeah,
like I said before we started recording, this episode was getting the horror episode out of the way for the season, It was good, though. Overall, I enjoyed the episode, personally.
I did too. And I did too. It actually probably, I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite episode so far, but it definitely felt like the one with the least dead air, so to speak, in it. it felt like it dragged the least. You know, the train job had that whole like 5 minute segment where they're like trying to convince the sheriff that they're all right, and they're just sitting like in that room being like, oh no, if the Alliance finds out who we are, we're screwed. That just kind of dragged. Serenity had like a lot of time, just dead air, kind of in the middle.
This one definitely felt like it had the most going on. I don't know for a fact, but I want to say this was actually the shortest episode. Obviously, it's between the train job and this one because the pilot, the actual pilot, was an hour and a half. Right. But I think this one was almost like 7 or 8 minutes shorter than the train job. Don't quote me on that. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll look up the run times, but I think it was a fair bit shorter.
Well, quote him on that, but only if he looks up the times and puts them in the show notes and he's correct.
Yeah, so take a look at the show notes is the key here. That would actually make sense, though, because the train job was technically devised as a second pilot. And I mean, maybe it would make sense from a writing perspective, too, seeing as this one has more going on, because the train job was written on such a tight schedule. Again, apparently, or according to Joss Whedon, in a single weekend.
Classic Joss Whedon.
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 The cool whip bit, but with Joss Whedon.
Damn, where is that bit from? I know Family Guy did that bit once, but I don't think they did it first because like Family Guy steals most of their jokes.
Yeah. I wouldn't know. I mean, if you asked me where it was from, I would say Family Guy. So if that's not the case, then I don't know.
Well, I guess. Check the show notes.
Family Guy also,
I'll find it somehow. I don't know how, but...
Yeah. I don't know how I know this either, but like last night was the last time Family Guy aired on a non-Disney network. It's like moving exclusively to Disney. I don't know why I know that. I haven't watched Family Guy in like 10 years, but...
Last night, as in September 18th. We're recording this on the 19th of September, I guess, for the audience who really want to know like the date for that fun fact for trivia night.
Yeah. 2021.
Yeah, 2021.
We should clarify. Yeah. Imagine if we just like dropped all the dates on this podcast from like way in the future and just kind of pretended that we were from the future. I don't know, whatever.
You know how that would work out? It would work out like the 5 Doctors episode of Trust Your Doctor.
Oh yeah, the one where we thought we could act.
Look. we acted a lot better than most guest stars on Doctor Who in that era. Okay. We acted.
Wow, scathing words, but perhaps true.
And we weren't even getting paid.
The guest stars on this episode acted fairly well.
There weren't many. There weren't many, which, you know, I guess is to this episode's credit that it was able to make an interesting plot with very few like actual guest stars. There's only 2 of note. One is the survivor on the ship, who we'll explain in a second, and one is like the Alliance captain. And then obviously there are some background roles for the Alliance. Nothing really notable though.
I guess we can just dive right into it. And the episode kind of starts in a weird way, in 2 ways, which is obviously one that it starts with the crew just playing some sort of game, some ball game. Looks like some sort of combination of basketball and
Quidditch.
Oh God, what? Quidditch, yeah. What is that? I think it's called spike ball. Have you heard of this? It's like a new sport.
Yeah, I know about spike ball. I've seen some people at the park playing spike ball before.
Yeah, it just rose to prominence like within the last couple of years, actually. It's been around for about 10, 15 years, but yeah.
Damn.
It's like, I don't really know the rules or how to describe it, but it's like there's a tiny little net. It's pretty small, and it's in the middle of like the playing area.
Yeah, I think basically it's like you Now, I've only ever seen it play in teams of two, and whenever I've seen it played, you bounce it off the net, and then when someone on your team gets it, they have to kind of like pop it up off their hand. Kind of use it's kind of like volleyball in a way.
Oh,
You
yeah.
pop the ball up off your hand, and then your teammate has to spike it off the net back to the other team, and then you just go until one of the teams drops the ball, a la volleyball, I guess. Although in,
Sounds...
although in volleyball there's lines, so if you go out, if you hit the ball out, you lose. But in spike ball, there's no lines. It's very freeform.
chaos.
Kind of, yes. I think
It sounds actually really hard.
play it like individually solo, but I don't. I think I don't know. I think I read or heard once that if you're playing like solo, you have to like there's an order to whom you have to like spike it to. So it's not like you just spike it.
Gotcha.
You just spike it into the void and then like between two people and like, oh well, you both lose a point, or like just the guy who spikes it gets 1 point or something like. I don't know. I really don't know for sure. I'm like trying to attach fragments of memories together. My 3 neurons are firing on full blast right now.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that.
Anyway, at the start of the episode, I actually want to make a note. I don't actually even know if we mentioned this last week. I kind of think we didn't, because I would have made this comment last week if we did. But there's a voiceover now before the episode actually starts that wasn't in the actual pilot's Serenity, but was in the train job. And it's Shepard Book basically giving us this sort of lowdown on the universe, that Earth was destroyed, so we left the solar system and we found a new solar system. And then he says like hundreds of new Earths were terraformed. And I was like, hundreds? What solar system are you in where there's hundreds of planets?
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember this from when I first watched the show, but I'm pretty sure the DVD release that I'm watching, unless I just like excised it from my memory, does not include that voiceover.
Huh, wow.
Yeah. I guess they just didn't like Book that much, so they're just like, all right, cut him out. No, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. I read that Book doesn't say it every episode, that on occasion Mal is the one who delivers the opening voiceover. So it's not always Book. I don't know. I guess I'll keep my eye out. Like I said, I'm watching these on Hulu, and Hulu does include the voiceover at the beginning, not on Serenity, like I said. Guess I'll keep my eye out.
Yeah, that's weird. That I wonder why they didn't include that. Maybe they did include it, and I'm just blanking on, just like have no memory of it for some reason.
I mean, I guess it's possible. The first like 2 minutes of an episode are always a write-off. But if I'm watching something, I'm not even going to remember what happens in the first 2 minutes an hour from now.
Well, the first 2 minutes and other like various small, like maybe 10-second chunks of this episode are really weird, because the characters, specifically Jane, actually keep referencing like a traveler they met before the episode started. Did you notice that? I was like, did I miss? I kind of thought for a second that I was watching the wrong episode, like I'd skipped to episode 4 or something accidentally, and I was like, did I miss something? But no, it's just a part of the episode that they like met a guy before this all happened.
Yeah, it's just building out the world, building in some space for Big Finish to put in some stories between the episodes.
Oh my god. Yeah, if Firefly was British, you bet Big Finish would be trying to get their hands on it.
They might have even been trying to get their hands on it anyway. Who knows?
Yeah, true. Does Big Finish like tackle any solely American properties?
Let's go to bigfinish.com. We love stories and find out.
Yeah. Yeah, you sure do love stories. We can tell.
Most okay, most of this website is Doctor Who now. If you like hover over the collections tab, there's like an entire Doctor Who column, and then the Worlds of Doctor Who column, which is like Jago and Lightfoot and Unit, and then the Worlds of Big Finish, which is like Doctor Who adjacent things. This is like Bernice Summerfield and Iris Wildtime, like characters that originated on Big Finish audios for Doctor Who. So that's kind of hilarious. Here we go. Let's see. The Thunderhawks is British, right? Yeah, Thunderhawks is British. They've done some. It looks like they've done some Star Trek audiobooks. So I guess the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell is 5-Star 5? 5-Star 5, Jerry Anderson's answer to Star Wars, was on the cusp of entering production in 1978 when the financing for the feature fell through. Now the world of 5-Star 5 has been brought to life by author Richard James and narrator Robbie Stevens in a novelization of the original feature script by Jerry Anderson and Tony Barwick.
Sounds pretty cool, actually.
The title of the release is 5-Star 5, John Lovell and the Zargon Threat.
Yeah, I'd listen to this.
Neat, I guess. So some of these products that, like, some of these licenses, okay, a lot of them are Jerry Anderson, as I'm finding out, have, like, really cool names, like 5-Star 5, Gemini Force 1. All have really cool names. Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons.
The
Another
Omega
Jerry
Factor?
Anderson.
Is that a... No, that's something else.
Anyway, yeah, so I guess based on what I'm seeing, like, Star Trek is pretty much... Damn, they've done a hell of a lot of Jerry Anderson stuff at Big Finish. I did not realize how much Jerry Anderson stuff they've done. Anyway, they're like 3 Star Trek audiobooks they did. Are, I guess, the only American thing that I can see that they've done.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe one day they'll have Firefly, to tap into, I guess.
Big Finish is taking over the world. Slowly.
In audio format.
They've also done Space 1999, but I think that was a co-production between, like, Canada and Britain, so I don't think that counts.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, so Simon is sitting this one out. He looks like he's actually the type to sit all of the rounds out. He's sort of watching from the sidelines as the rest of the crew plays this game. And Inara walks in, and they kind of have this little heart-to-heart.
He does say something like he's trying to figure out the rules of the game, and he can't figure them out, because it doesn't seem like they're playing with any one consistent set of rules.
Well, there you go. There's our spike ball connection. Joss Whedon truly was ahead of his time.
Joss, you've done it again.
We still don't know. We still haven't answered the I guess what is going to be the question of the season is Joss Whedon an auteur?
You're only saying it's going to be the question of the season because I put that as the tagline on our Serenity episode. Because we don't have titles for our inevitable episodes like we do for Trust Your Doctor. But if we did, Is Joss Whedon an auteur would have been the title of that first episode.
Oh, God, Joss.
This episode wasn't written or directed. I think the first episode of the season that wasn't written or directed by Joss Whedon.
No, but it was written by the other executive producer.
Minear.
Yeah. So we're still waiting to get the first one that isn't written by one of the executive producers of the show.
You're saying we're still Joss Whedon adjacent.
Yeah, what I'm saying really is that we're still waiting for Jane Espenson to step in
and save this show.
I found out actually right before we started recording that Jane Espenson co-wrote what looks to be an academic article about Firefly entitled Finding Serenity, Anti-Heroes, Lost Shepherds, and Space Hookers in Joss Whedon's Firefly.
I have a vague memory of hearing about this 2 weeks ago when we were recording our Serenity episode, and like finding an offhanded mention to it on the Wikipedia page, and I think the Wikipedia page described it as being like half critical analysis of the show, half Jane Espenson's experience behind the scenes writing the show. Might be interesting to track down and read, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, if it is an academic article, good luck reading it for free. I mean, unless you know where to look, which, unless you know where to look, let's just leave it at that.
Well, I happen to also have industry, I guess, academic credentials, I should say.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You can actually get at it.
And then just commit paper piracy and disseminate it on the internet for free.
Yeah. It is, I mean, it's interesting, though, that one of the writers of the show, wrote this article about it. She co-wrote it. The other writer is Glenn Yeffith. I don't know if I'm
Never
pronouncing
heard that name in
right.
my life.
No, yeah, I'm sure. He's probably just a random academic, I would assume. But yeah, I mean, I can't really think of any other instances of, especially TV writers. But I'm also trying to think of, like, I don't know, novelists or fiction writers writing an academic style article about their own work. I can't think of any, to be honest.
Yeah, and you would be more qualified to think of this than me, and I definitely can't think of anybody.
I think the only one I could maybe say was like maybe Toni Morrison in one of her academic or analytical books references her work. I don't know for a fact, but like that seems like it might be the case.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable kind of guess. Anyway, they end up bonking into like a body floating in space, and they go, "What the hell was that?" And Wash kind of points out / discovers that they've basically run into it's not a derelict ship, but an abandoned ship. Because it's basically there's no power on, it's not putting out a distress call, and it's just all around very suspicious.
Right. When Kaylee gets a look at it too, she says some. I don't remember exactly what she says, but she explains why it's sort of floating in an odd manner.
Yeah, one of the thrusters got like stuck on or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Jane then presents the most like I don't even know what word to describe this with. The most like pessimistic possible theory on what happened. He's like, "Oh, that body we ran into, yeah, he killed everyone on board, and then he decided to take a spacewalk because he like didn't want to live anymore." Just like, okay.
Right. Meanwhile, Shepard Book, in his most vocal scene of the show so far, is adamant about going onto the ship and kind of just seeing if there are any survivors or if anyone's there, and if there are, saving them.
Yeah, because Mal kind of explains, actually, and I guess we get a little bit of backstory or insight into the world here. He explains that this type of ship, specifically this class, is quite old, but you can buy it or acquire it, shall we say, for pretty cheap on, I guess, these auctions.
On eBay.
And once, you can then outfit them for pretty cheap to carry. I think they say like 16 to 20 families probably would have fit on that ship.
Right, and I think it's Zoe who kind of speculates that like this was a settler ship, probably a bunch of families going out to settle some planet, one of the hundreds of terraformed planets. But then Mal eventually does agree to Book's idea, but maybe not for the exact same reason that Book wants to go onto the ship. He wants to see if there are any sort of valuables that they can take. And then as soon as he says this, Jane is like, "Oh yeah, we should go see if there are any survivors on the ship." Yeah.
Yeah, Jane was the funniest part of this episode because the whole beginning of the episode, he's all like gung ho, like big, you know, big BDE, so to speak. Like, yeah, like I'm in charge. Like, there's nothing to worry about. And like the instant Mal mentions Reavers later on, he's like, never mind, we should GTFO.
Yeah, Jane is definitely the comic relief in this episode, and probably will be in most of them. And I'm still holding out. I'm sure it's going to happen. Where it's like at some point he's not going to be the comic relief anymore. Like he's going to be played straight, and it's going to be like kind of scary, or that's going to be when like Mal's really kind of tested or something like that. Because we get it in this episode too. Despite how funny it is, there is like this sort of dark side to Jane.
Yeah, right. So they make their way over to the ship, and Simon actually he's waiting in the cargo bay, and Jane's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, well, if there are any survivors, I wanted to like come with to in case they needed medical attention." And Jane says something like, "Well, Mal and Zoe are gonna go first, and I'm gonna go with them, and then we'll holler if we need you or anything." And he's like, "Okay."
He makes some snide comment too, where he's like, sometimes you just find trash out in space and it just kind of attaches to you. He puts it more eloquently than that, which, sad to say, I'm less eloquent than Jane. But,
really, you're less eloquent than Tim Minear.
I like that line that Tim Minear dropped later in the episode where he's like, poetic. It was like, all right, really paying yourself homage there to, your own line.
Yeah, really patting yourself on the back.
Yeah.
That meme where someone's edited like Obama giving someone a Medal of Honor.
Oh yeah,
just so that he's putting it around his own neck.
Mm-hmm. But basically, Jane at first insinuates that Simon and River are pieces of trash, and then just flat out says it because he's Jane.
Yeah, he's Jane, and he doesn't know how to hold his tongue, I guess.
We actually skipped the like tiny little bit right before when they're wondering what the ship is and who's on it, and then it kind of just focuses in on River. I want to say it's a zoom in, which I can't remember, but I feel like it might be the case since that like making of documentary was like, yeah, we did some zoom ins. We're pretty proud of that type thing. But it focuses in on River, and she's like, ghosts?
Yeah, I was like, okay. We also skipped, and this at first seemed completely like irrelevant, but as it turns out later is actually completely relevant. It zooms in on the outside on the ship, shooting out these weird tentacle things and just attaching itself to Serenity.
Yeah, I thought that was just like part of their docking process or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I saw it, I was like, "Oh, it's part of the docking process. It's it's whatever, right? Basically,
just these weird, like organic-looking squid tentacles that are part of the docking process." Yeah, but no, there's.
So yeah, they go over to the ship, and there's no one there. They're like, "Well, this is kind of weird," and one of the lifeboats is gone, but I think Zoe mentions that like the amount of people that had to have been on the ship wouldn't have fit into one lifeboat because only one lifeboat is missing.
So they decide to take what they can.
Yeah, they decide to commit acts of piracy. But at the exact moment they find... I think Wash looks up like schematics for that ship, and he relays to them, "Oh, yeah, this is where the valuables are going to be. It's going to be on, like, Deck C in the back." And, like, the instant they get there and they're looking through everything, they're like, "Wait a minute."
Yes.
And they look up to the ceiling and see just bodies, just all hanging from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And they instantly call Jane and go, "Jane!" And Jane, right at that moment, gets attacked by someone. Smash cut to black.
Smash cut to...
Credits roll.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, it's just an ad break, but kind of the same vibe.
At that point, Jane has already tricked Simon onto the ship as well. There's a scene where Simon is kind of consoling River because she's very distraught over this ship, despite how excited she seemed about the ghosts.
Because she's sensing something on the ship that's making her uneasy.
Mm-hmm. So Simon's kind of trying to console her, and Jane is like, hey, Mal wants you over on the ship. And he's like, oh, all right. So he goes over, and they're just like, what are you doing here? And why are you wearing your spacesuit, like, totally incorrectly? And Jane just, like, breaks out, starts cackling.
Yeah, but we should mention, we kind of glossed over, but earlier in the conversation that Simon has with Jane, he says something about being, like, kind of uncomfortable, that the only thing between you and oblivion is, like, a couple layers of, like, mylar and your glass helmet, basically.
Mm-hmm. Which is it's foreshadowing for this. This is done really well because it's foreshadowing for this humorous moment, but then little do we know that there's going to be even more payoff in, like, a more serious scene.
Yeah, you think this is the end of it, but the episode gets you later.
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead style almost, you know? Where it's like they just keep the recurring...
Like the You've Got Red on your shirt?
Yeah. Well, so they find actually... this is right before I think they realize that Reavers attacked the ship, but they find, like, massive amounts of food, which, as was already established, is pretty valuable in this universe. So they decide to focus their efforts on that, just haul as much of that onto the Serenity as they can.
Yeah, they decide, screw everything else, let's just take this. Although they do end up finding the man who attacked Jane and basically ripping him out of his hiding spot, sedating him, and bringing him over to Serenity.
Mm-hmm. And he's sort of incoherently rambling.
They all kind of gather in the galley to discuss what to do next. And Shepherd Book wants to go over and basically give the dead sort of a eulogy. And he says something like, what does he say? I have it written down here. The way we treat our dead is what makes us different. Because at this point, they've realized that, oh shoot, like the other ship was hit by Reavers, and that's why, like, everybody's dead.
Mm-hmm. And they send the unlikeliest party over to go put their souls to rest or something like that, which is Shepherd Book, Simon, I think Jane.
Yeah, and the instant they've mentioned the Reavers, Jane is, like, not down with this plan, like, at all. He's like, no way. But Mal enforces his position as captain of the ship and basically says, Jane, you're going. Somebody has to make sure the Doctor and Shepherd Book are all right.
Mm-hmm. And it's my guess at this point that Jane has a history with the Reavers, or his backstory is somehow related to the Reavers, because every time they're brought up, he's the most vocally in favor of not having anything to do with them. Right. I don't remember, honestly. I'm not just saying that as like a snide little type thing, since I've watched the show already, but I completely don't remember.
Interesting. So they go over. I think Inara walks up to Mal and is like, wow, that was remarkably, like, kind of you and nice. And he's like, I actually sent them away because, like, we're attached to the other ship and they've got, like, if we try and leave, we're going to get blown sky high, and we needed to solve this problem without, like, the Doctor and Shepherd Book around panicking.
Yeah, so basically it was a Reaver booby trap. So this kind of, I liked this. It added a bit more tension to the episode, where basically the Reavers set this trap that would do exactly what you described, blow up the ship if they tried to detach. And I guess the idea is that they set these traps and then come back after a while to see if anyone fell into them.
Yeah, you set the bear trap and then you come back to see
Yeah.
if you caught a bear. I guess.
We don't actually see the Reavers show up in this episode. There's a little fake out pretty soon, actually.
Well, we get some indication that this is how the Reavers create more Reavers. Because the guy who they left behind there is some confusion amongst Mal and his senior staff because the Reavers historically don't leave people alive. They don't leave survivors. So they're not really sure why this guy survived. As they realize very quickly, they made him watch as they slaughtered the rest of the people on the ship.
Mm-hmm. And we do actually get some lore type stuff with the Reavers. It seems even within the universe, it's not quite clear who the Reavers are or how they came to be. I think it was Mal. It might have been one of the other characters, but I think it was Mal who was like, yeah, the Reavers basically looked into like the void and the blackness of space and lost their humanity.
They gazed into the abyss and the abyss gazed back.
That's actually, it was interesting how he phrased it, which I don't remember the exact phrasing, but Joss Whedon described Firefly, maybe not even really an apt description, but he said like, it's about a group of people who look into the blackness of space and everyone sees something different. Which I don't know how apt that description is, but that's what he said.
It's certainly an interesting description of the show.
Yeah, but it almost, like, to me, it almost implies, like, a far bleaker and humorless show than Firefly is.
Than Firefly actually is?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it does actually. Kind of.
Maybe in Joss Whedon's mind, this is dark. You know, it is dark, this episode in particular, but, you know, it's not as dark as it could be. It's like most of the episodes aren't dark, type thing. But maybe to Joss Whedon, they are. We need
Maybe.
We need an inside my mind style documentary for Joss Whedon. Forget Patrick McGowan. Joss Whedon is far more significant and prolific than Patrick McGowan, okay?
Wow, whoa, that's an extremely interesting statement.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but true. I think he is more prolific. I mean, Patrick McGowan just kind of disappeared after The Prisoner for many years.
Yeah. Well, Patrick McGowan had basically created his magnum opus at that point. He had done what he wanted to do, you know. He had set out, he had, you know, my understanding, he had set out to do this, you know, to create The Prisoner, basically, as a, you know, he had become an actor and a writer to do this, and then he did it, and then, you know, once you've done what you set out to do,
yeah, then
no point in
true
continuing.
Enough, yeah.
Anyway, back to Firefly. They're like they get themselves detached, and like not 3 seconds later, and the like proximity alarm, I guess, goes off, and Jane starts panicking. He's like, "Oh God, the Reavers! They're back! They come to kill us!" But it turns out it's just that pesky alliance.
Oh, them.
Oh, you.
I know, that's what I was kind of going for, but it doesn't really work when it's like third person.
Well, you know, it was an admirable effort.
Speaking of admirable, they meet like the admiral. No, I don't know if he's an admiral. He's not, actually.
I think he's a captain.
Yeah. And it's quickly made clear that he is kind of in over his head. Quickly clear that he is traveling by foot through uncleared terrain, figuratively. He's figuratively bushwhacked, so to speak, you might say.
Slow clap.
So they all get taken in for interrogation. There's an interesting scene where you kind of get a little insight into Mal's mind, which is that he knows Serenity is about to be boarded, so he's like, all right, just unhide all the goods. Jane is like, what do you mean? We just hid them.
And he eventually... He actually doesn't explain this to the audience, but it is telegraphed heavily that the reason they're doing this is because then they can hide Simon and River. And if the Alliance thinks they've found everything that's hidden, then they won't look for Simon and River.
Right, and we as the audience know already that they don't really know much about Simon and River other than the fact that there is a pair, a brother and sister pair of fugitives who might be aboard the ship. They don't know what they look like. They don't know anything about them. That's all they know. So I guess Mal's idea is if they kind of if Simon and River are out in plain sight, it won't look like they're hiding anything. It won't look like they're fugitives. But that's not really the case. He has another plan in mind that we find out in just a minute. Surprisingly enough.
Anyway, the Alliance takes the survivor off the ship to their, I guess, superior medical facility, and we've seen a scene where the survivor guy has stolen a scalpel from Serenity, and right at this moment wakes up and starts just slaughtering the doctors.
Yep, the first of a couple instances of people helping someone and that person just screwing them over. Meanwhile, the Alliance has decided to interrogate all the members of Serenity, and it quickly comes to regret it in a pretty funny scene, actually.
Yeah, they basically give nothing up. They rock solid alibis. If you can even call them alibis.
They just use the annoy the interrogators to the point where they don't even want to be there anymore tactic. And it works.
Yeah, eventually they decide to throw Mal in the brig, but not before right at that instance someone comes in and goes, hey Cap, the entire medical staff is dead. And he realizes that Mal was telling the truth about this guy possibly now being Reaver-esque.
Because Mal drops the information at this point that we already described that, the guy couldn't psychologically deal with having witnessed the Reaver attack and is now sort of slowly transforming himself into a Reaver. Apparently he sliced his tongue down the middle.
Yeah, that's how... that's how Mal figured out that he's like a Reaver now. I guess because Reavers do that.
He also has some other grotesque body mods that we see for just, a split second when we see his face later on. I don't really even know how to describe them. It's just bits of metal inlaid into his skin. I don't know how he did that.
No idea.
Just took a stapler to his face or something. Anyway, they get Mal to go investigate. In a funny moment, he's handcuffed with his hands behind his back, and then he's like, "Can you take these off? It would really help me survive in there." And they just cuff him in the front instead. We didn't describe the main not main, but we didn't describe one of the biggest parts of this entire sequence though, which is that River and Simon are actually not aboard Serenity. They're hanging on to the outside of the ship. And right. Simon is very visibly frightened by basically what he said before, how thin the materials of the spacesuits are, how he's inches away from death, and also how he's, one sort of handhold, one, grasp away also from death.
From flying out into the expanse of space.
And yeah, to me, that's always been one of the most frightening thoughts is like just imagining being in space and then just like losing your connection to whatever you're connected to, with a ship or whatever, and just kind of free floating.
Free floating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like probably one of the most terrifying ways to die.
Yeah.
Because you'll just die really slowly as you run out of oxygen, you know? There's not really any way that you can, like, kill yourself in those suits unless you take your helmet off and then just liquefy yourself in space.
Yeah, or bite your tongue off or something like that.
I guess it's only, like, really terrifying because you know you're gonna die and you have literally no way to stop it for, like, 8 hours.
River is having the time of her life, though. She's looking out into the abyss and and seeing it look back and just laughing in its face.
Well, she's got some things she needs to work through.
Yeah. She's been through a little government experimentation. It's all good.
Nothing that a couple years of therapy won't fix.
They actually venture back into the ship, though. I don't really know why they do this. It's never really made clear.
I think because once the Alliance has finished searching the ship, they have no reason to bum around outside, I guess.
Yeah, but they are still searching the ship.
Yes. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Maybe they were just hungry, because there was that line where Simon's like, all right, we're just going to grab the food and get out of here. So that's probably it. But they're sort of, when Mal and his captors are walking through, they kind of confront Simon and River. Not confront, but they're nearby. They're in the proximity. Simon and River are hiding in like a really poor hiding place, and there's kind of this tense scene where someone walks up to them and it's Mal, and he just looks at them like, for real, guys? For real?
Luckily for them, a distraction occurs in the form of the survivor brutally murdering one of the guards that they brought with them.
Luckily for them, a homicide occurs nearby.
Well, there's a statement. There's a statement you would never think you would hear. Luckily for them, a homicide occurs.
Yeah. Just one of the many, many things I've said in our years of podcasting that can be taken far out of context.
Another great audio snippet that our detractors can just use.
Yeah. But they subdue him. They get him. And in the most abrupt ending of the show so far, granted there are only 3 episodes, but still, the Alliance decides to just take the goods themselves, the food that is, bomb the derelict ship, pay seemingly no thanks or recompense whatsoever to Mal and his crew, and book it out of there.
Yep. It is like I think we're underplaying like how abrupt the ending is.
Yeah, it is very abrupt. It's but at the same time, as I was watching this, I was like, well, that's an abrupt ending. But then, as the credits were rolling, I was like, well, like, where else would they have gone with it? What else could they have done? Would they just draw it out more than it needed to be drawn out? Because it's kind of, most of the stuff that was set up was resolved. It's maybe you would expect some more, I don't know, elaboration or just discussion about the Reaver transformation that they were in the process of happening, that they stopped.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be a little bit of group therapy here, group commiseration over what just happened. But nah, nah.
I was fine with it though. I think it it fit well. It lended, you know, a lot to the somber tone. Somber, I guess, actually. It's pronounced somber.
Right. And yeah, so that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, got the horror episode out of the way, nice and early.
A lot to unpack with the still continuing, to build up the Reavers here as not the big bad, but the they're building them up to be as scary, if not more so, than the Alliance.
Right. They're building a lot of things, I think, in this episode that maybe our sort of a summary didn't give the episode credit for, which is that, we knew that River was kind of weird and obviously had some problems due to the experimentation, but this episode drives that point home more. What else? The relationship, I guess, that I'm guessing is the case between Jane and the Reavers.
Mm-hmm.
We actually get more of the marital stuff between Zoe and Wash, where Wash, like when Wash is being interrogated, he's always talking about Zoe, and then when Zoe's being interrogated, she's pretty tight-lipped, and she's not talking about Wash, and the guy goes like, is there any reason you're not talking about your husband? Obviously it's because of the situation, but like as an audience and like from a storytelling perspective, this is kind of adding to the I don't want to call it a love triangle, but like maybe sort of, marital strife between Zoe and Wash. Zoe's potentially more interested in Mal than her own husband. Because there's that Prisoner 2009-esque scene or moment, actually, that kind of fakes you out where what was it? It was like the interrogator, the guy, the commander was like, he asks, do you love him? And then, but it's like, it's not what you think it is. Do you remember that?
Yes, because he's he's like asking Kaylee questions, and then he asks, do you love him? And it cuts back to reveal that he's actually asking Zoe that question and not Kaylee.
Oh, right. Oh, wasn't it Inara with regard?
Sorry, he was asking Inara. Yeah, you're right. He was asking Inara because you think, he's asking about Mal, but plot twist.
Right, and how that's kind of done narratively is like, okay, so he's connecting, obviously he's asking Zoe if she loves Wash, but it's kind of, you kind of think in the moment, like Mal is kind of drawn into it in a way,
Mm-hmm.
So interesting stuff there. I closed the tab, but
Nice.
There's a word actually for that thing we talked about when we watched The Prisoner 2009, where it's like the direction of a scene tricks you into thinking it's something else. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll find it pretty easily. But there's a term for it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
What else is this setting up? I guess this episode drives home the point even more that like food is the most valuable thing in this universe, or this solar system rather. So yeah, I guess when you kind of take a step back and look, it's not like really introducing too much that's new. It's just sort of a early in the season episode that kind of establishes things more. There's that, I don't know exactly what this is, but it's like, you don't remember something, or it's like people don't remember. If you learn a new word, you don't like actually learn it until you hear it like 5 or 6 times or something like that. So maybe that's sort of the case here, but with like narrative or something, it's like just kind of reestablishing or establishing things more. I don't know.
Right.
A couple things that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you had any before we jump into our regular segments.
Not much. Let me look at my notes here. No, we talked about the food being scarce thing, which is like the one thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, I just wanted to talk more about more of the world, I guess we got, because we learned more about the battle that we saw at the beginning of Serenity. The captain, when he's talking with Mal, kind of talks about how Mal was at the Battle of Serenity Valley, which is that battle. So we find out why Serenity's named Serenity. And we also find out that basically, like, that was the final battle of not the final battle, but was essentially the final battle. The captain says that most people think that the Independents lost the war at the Battle of Serenity Valley.
Yeah, it makes sense considering they just got like carpet bombed and didn't have reinforcements show up.
Considering they got wiped. just
just
wiped.
Yeah, just literally eradicated, just annihilated.
Just spawn camping.
You see a guy like 360 no scope. Okay, never mind. But no, Mal is actually he's very he's not hesitant whatsoever to reveal to this commander that he is still sympathetic to the Browncoats.
Which seems like a bad move when you're like on the Alliance ship being interrogated. Like that'd be like 2 years after the Civil War, being like, yeah, I'm a proud Confederate. What are you gonna do about it?
I'm sure that was the case, like in the South.
Probably.
And still is, like pushing
Probably.
200 years later.
I mean, yeah, it still is.
I mean, it's been like what 180 years, and it's still like. I think that's probably completely wrong. I barely know anything about American history, timeline wise.
About like, 140, 150.
Yeah. It's still the case. I'm sure like a year or two after, there are probably people like, you know how there are people like, you know how they've various points in the past like 60 years, 70 years found like Japanese World War II fighters and like infantrymen who like still thought the war was going on, like living out on random islands in the Pacific and stuff like that. I'm sure there was like, what if there was people who thought the Civil War was like still going on? They didn't hear that it was over.
Just people like deep in the Midwest,
Yeah.
Which I guess was the West at that time.
You've heard about
just like in the frontier, being like, "Wait, the war's over."
Yeah, you've heard about that though, right? Like those random like yeah. People on like random islands in the Pacific, like still thought World War II was going on in like 1980, 1990.
Damn, they must have thought that war just straight sucked for like... They must have thought that war must have gone on for like 30, 40 years.
Yeah. One other thing we do learn about Serenity, though, is just reconfirming it is just Serenity. Thanks, Inara. Thanks for confirming that. It's not the Serenity. Because the guy goes like, so you're a member of the Serenity? She goes, just Serenity, actually. You can tell that's something that they are stuck up and, know-it-alls about.
Pretentious about.
Exactly. The other thing I just wanted to talk about, though, was the soundtrack. I thought it was good and fitting this week, you know? I don't know about you, but...
Yeah, it was all right this week. It was all right. Yeah, it was all right.
I guess that's my mission for this season, is to get Dylan to say that it was good for one of the episodes. Not really, I don't know.
What? Why would you do that to yourself?
I don't really care. It's not really standout. It's not that good. I don't think it's bad, but it wasn't, anything special.
Yeah, it was fine this week. It was fine.
Yeah, because burn the land, boil the sea.
You can't take the sky from me. Yes!
Joss Whedon, poet laureate in the making.
I never thought I would admit this on air, even though it's like, it's not even that bad. It's just, there was almost never a time this is going to come up, but you know, like I explained in Serenity, I watched Serenity and Serenity. You know, that's all I had watched of Firefly before the show. And in the interim, I don't know, I guess it would be 8 years now since that time. When, you know, whenever people would like reference the Firefly theme, like online, you know, with the lyrics, for some reason in my head, I always remembered the theme being like way more higher tempo, like higher tempo, just like more upbeat, more electric guitar kind of aesthetic. So like imagine my shock and awe when I watched Serenity and was like, wow, this is nothing, nothing like what I thought slash fake remembered this theme being like. And it's still 3 weeks in now. Continues to surprise me. I go, oh yeah, that's how the theme goes.
Yeah, memory is a powerful thing, even when it's false.
Wrong.
Even when it's Berenstain Bears effect-esque.
Except that one has like the really simple explanation that like one is the spelling of the authors and one is the spelling of the bears, and people were just conflating the two in their mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched like a really long video about that at one point where the guy like dug deep into archived like footage of the books and like blurry like
blurry Zapruder film-esque.
And his concluding like thought was that he had found one piece of evidence where the spelling was as people remembered it, and he was like, if we could just like AI enhance this image, then we would be able to tell the truth.
The truth is, one of them was the spelling of the authors and one of them was the spelling of the bears, and people just misremembered it. Okay, that's the truth. The more interesting one is the actual like Mandela effect, where some people remember Mandela being in prison like deep into, what is it, the 80s or the 90s, like well after he was actually released from prison.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I guess that's that. So I guess we can talk about our Western, you know, elements to this episode. Not our, it's not like we created them, but
we have created them.
Well, according to Decorative Vegetable podcast lore, I don't know if we've ever actually explained this on Inevitable, but we have a running joke on Trust Your Doctor that Doctor Who was created by time travelers who pieced together the show from our podcast, went back in time to the 60s and created the show.
Yeah, and that's why like so many of our episodes accidentally reference things that happen later on before we've watched those episodes. Look for all the people who are like just finding Decorative Vegetable via, you know, Inevitable. They've got 7 years worth of lore to catch up on. 7 years worth of lore.
7 years worth of memes.
To bring it back to the beginning of this episode when I mentioned the Five Doctors episode of Trust Your Doctor, you know, for all the people who want a little taste of the lore,
God.
like on that episode we had two hosts of a different Doctor Who podcast come on for a little segment and read a couple lines as if they were playing, or, you know, future versions of us.
Yeah, as if they were playing future versions of us. They actually were. It was just as if they were playing them.
You know. Yeah. They actually were. Time travel is canon to the Decorative Vegetable universe. Anyway, okay, Western tropes. I actually didn't have any this week. Maybe that was me just not really paying enough attention.
No, I didn't actually either.
Well, one of the really interesting things about Firefly is, you know, we talk a lot about, oh, it's a Western in space, and I have two comments related to this. The first is that most Western shows don't feature like a group of protagonists, or Western movies. A lot of them feature a sole or maybe two protagonists. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly had kind of three. So sometimes it's difficult to draw like direct analogs between things that happen in Firefly and like, oh, this is the Western trope that they're using or sending up or parodying, right? Second off, I can't believe last week we were like, can't believe we didn't compare this to Blake 7. And this week I'm like, can't believe we didn't compare this to Star Trek, because believe it or not, Star Trek was also pitched as a space western originally, the original Star Trek, the original series. The way that Gene Roddenberry sold it to the studio was Wagon Train to the Stars, and Wagon Train was a Western television show that ran in the late 50s, early 60s that featured a group of people on a wagon train going out west. So it's interesting that like a lot actually of sci-fi seems to be, well, it's a Western, but in space.
Yeah, it's like the Oregon Trail, except instead of dying of dysentery, everyone dies of, I don't know,
lack of oxygen,
radiation exposure or something like that. It makes sense though. I mean, like the West, for a large portion of I guess Anglo-American history was basically like the frontier of the country. So, now space is the final frontier. So to reference that, to actually reference Star Trek, yeah.
I'm just reading the Wagon Train Wikipedia page, and in the cultural influences section, it's like, in the film Stand By Me, Gordy, Will Wheaton quips while the boys are camping, Wagon Train is a cool show, but you ever notice they never get anywhere? They just keep on wagon training.
Yeah, because if they actually got to their destination, they need to end the show. It's like that, who's that Greek philosopher? I'm not going to remember the name, but like that Greek philosopher who was like, you can always keep dividing things by 2. So really, yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Shoot, that was either Plato or Socrates.
Really? It was one of them? I thought it was like one of the more unknown ones.
No, this is like a well-known paradox.
Yeah, was it I thought it was one of the lesser. Yeah, I thought it was like Diogenes.
It was Zeno. It's Zeno's paradox.
Yeah.
There we go. It was Zeno.
Yeah.
I think the resolution to the paradox is just that like space is not actually infinitely dividable. So
I read a short story once. This was when I was a kid. It was about a kid who was like trying to walk down the street, but he kept having to get halfway there before he could get to where he was going. So he just ended up walking forever.
Yeah, the resolution is that like you can't infinitely divide space and time in different ways. Like,
yeah,
you say he's walking forever, but he's also like walking infinite distance. And then like if you want to get into the real math of it, it's like the difference between countable infinity and uncountable infinity, which there is actually a difference between the two. There are different magnitudes of infinities.
Huh.
We don't need to go into that.
Weird. I think from a layperson's perspective, it's just like, yeah, it makes sense in theory, but he's just wrong. Like,
he's just wrong.
You actually can go places, it's not, I mean, I don't know if that was, if that was just in that short story I read, or if, like, was the actual paradox, like, him going, you actually can't, like, move through space because you have to keep getting halfway there, or was he just like, you can't, I don't know, whatever.
I think it was like you can't actually move. I think the original formulation was something about a guy shooting something with an arrow, and the arrow can like never reach its target because
it has to get halfway there before it gets there.
Yeah. All right, well, anyway, let's do America's 10 actors. All right, so I looked up Doug Savant or Savant. I like Savant better because it's funnier, but anyway. Also, one of the photos on his IMDb page is like one of the most terrifying photos I've just seen like on IMDb. It's like a picture of him in the X-Files with like blood coming out of his eyes and blood coming out of his nose. Just completely out of context, so that's cool, I guess.
Nice.
Anyway, he's still acting, actually. He was in The Rookie this year, 2021. He's been on NCIS twice, NCIS New Orleans, MacGyver, Castle. He's been in a couple things with Nathan Fillion. Like I already said, The X-Files, but he was specifically in the like reboot season, continuation season, whatever. He was on the Hawaii Five-O, Criminal Minds, Desperate Housewives, CSI, Nip Tuck 24, JAG. Excuse me. The 1998 Godzilla, Columbo, Red Surf, which I recognize, although I don't know why, and then like Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I was telling Keon before the podcast that 1998 Godzilla led me one time to discover the most like surreal website. It was like a website that was still up. This was about a year ago, from 1996, and it was basically a white page with just plain black text, like no fancy stuff, and it was a guy, and it was like there were dates. It was like clearly it had been added to over time. A guy like dissecting every single publicity material Lionsgate was releasing for the at the time upcoming 1998 Godzilla movie, and he was like trying to figure out how Godzilla looked and like if these Godzilla toys that were accidentally leaked like showed Godzilla from the movie or not. It was bizarre, and I'm never going to be able to find it again, so I'm not going to promise to put it in the show notes. I guess if I do find it, I'll put it there, but
Yeah, sounds weird. I mean, sounds like something that would never happen nowadays. Like, that's such a relic of the early internet, and especially now because, like, it's so easy to find material, trailers. Companies just release, like, blatant spoilers, designs for movies, stuff like that. So,
yeah, companies hold nothing back now unless you're Chris Chibnall's like Doctor Who.
So we also had the survivor in this episode, played by Brandon Morgan, and he's still, I guess, acting. His last credit according to IMDb was in 2015. But he's, played various parts in a bunch of different shows. He was in the Beverly Hillbillies. That was his first role in 1993. Looked like he just played random characters on shows, one-off episodes, stuff like that. He was in CSI in 2003, in Enemy Hands. Which is a movie, I think. Confessions of an Action Star, and then Confession, The Kid and I. He was in Monk. He was in an episode of Monk.
Nice. Good TV show, Monk.
Partners. He was in Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles for one episode, which has the
most... So you mentioned it has the most 2006 poster ever.
Yeah, which it does. He was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for one episode. He was in Fast and Furious Supercharged, which is apparently a video short.
Great.
But he wrote, directed, and produced Jimmy the Saint in 2017, which is a movie, I guess. Looks like sort of a crime/thriller movie.
Nice.
Yeah, so I guess that's what he's been up to in recent years. Also wrote The Devil Within, a TV series documentary. Or just a documentary, that's how IMDb has their terminology. It's a documentary TV show from this year, 2021. No idea what it's about. But, yeah. Oh, it's a true crime podcast. Hey.
Nice.
Examining the brutal January 1988 slaying of Betty Ann Sullivan on a snowy night in the small town of Jefferson Township, New Jersey. Yeah, that's how you know, like, some sketchy, like, cult/serial killer-esque stuff is going down, as if it's called Township,
Okay, so once again we have an email from Fan Steven. I don't know why I described him as Fan Steven. That was kind of weird. Anyway, anyway. The subject line of the email is awry in quotes. Hey guys.
Oh God.
I listened to your second Firefly episode and just wanted to set the record straight, recording my feelings about the awry pronunciation. I keep reading it as Ari in my head. I didn't hate.
Oh God, what have I done?
hate hearing the incorrect pronunciation on your Lex episode. I actually thought the anecdote was literally laugh out loud funny, and even joked about it when I had you guys on delayed replay talking about John Wick. Anyway, just clarifying so that people don't think that the decorative vegetable lore is inconsistent. And cheers, Stephen. I thought receiving this email was really funny because you've heard at this point that in this very episode of Inevitable, I went on a long, I guess, 5-minute tangent about decorative vegetable lore that Stephen would have had no idea about when he wrote this email, talking about wanting decorative vegetable lore to be consistent with his feelings on Arai versus Ori.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what they say, coincidence is never up to chance.
I've literally never heard that in my life.
Actually, nobody says that. I just
yeah,
made
I was
it up
going to say,
right now.
I've literally never heard that in my life.
Sounds good though. It's sort of catchy.
Great, I'll have it inscribed on my tombstone.
I know, yeah. When we finally kill all of our podcasts once and for all, that can be their it can be part of their eulogy.
Great.
Doesn't make much sense, but it sounds cool. So, therefore it has worth.
Yeah, well, anyway, thanks for
Steven.
emailing us, Stephen. Thanks for emailing us. Speaking of podcasts, because you and I have been on other podcasts, those podcasts exist within the same canon as the decorative vegetable canon.
God.
And those podcasts can be connected to other podcasts, which means that dozens, if not hundreds of podcasts can be joined to the decorative vegetable canon, where time travel is canon.
Considering we're starting to get into Doctor Who wiki levels of inanity and insanity, maybe it's best to wrap this episode up.
If you would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Bushwhacked. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you find the podcast at Inevitable, a classic sci-fi podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook. Trust your doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. Next time we're going to be watching Shindig, but until then, the end.